So I still haven't really figured out the algorithm of it. And how does it, like, what is it made out of? What kind of rationality is it causing, or what's the mechanism down there in the roots of it that just creates all this information and thought?
Good question. So there are a couple keys that you need. First of all, most people care about evolution as it affects them. So most of what goes on in evolutionary space is pretty much outside of their area of interest until it gets to at least people. In order to understand people, you have to understand that culture and genes both evolve. They do not evolve separately. They have a direct relationship with each other, and neither one is more important. They have a yin-yang relationship. Genes evolve slowly, but they have control over the space. Culture evolves quickly, but it is subordinate to the gene's objectives. So once you understand that, then the question is, okay, what is evolution? Well, the first thing is most evolution is random, and it makes no difference. So when we talk about evolution, we are almost always talking about adaptive evolution. And adaptive evolution is a tiny subset of the whole, but it is all of the important part. Now, to understand
it's the remainder.
It is the remainder, but it's the remainder, you know, like if you looked at the stock market and you said, what's going on here? Right? Well, almost everything that's going on there is noise. It has no meaning whatsoever. If you're interested in the stock market, you're not interested in the noise. You're interested in the signal. That's where the profit is to be made. This is the same. The signal is a tiny fraction of the sum, but it is the fraction that matters. And then the thing that I think is hard for people to grasp is there are amplifiers in evolutionary space that are responsible for the power of evolution to shape creatures. And think about it this way. You are the product of an unbroken line of successfully reproducing creatures that goes back at least 3.5 billion years. Unbroken. Not a single ancestor ever failed to reproduce. That is an amazing run of good luck. That good luck is about to run out. Almost no matter who you are, the line that has continued unbroken for 3.5 billion years is almost certain to be broken very soon. And it is only the tiny fraction that avoids that fate that will be responsible for the future generations. So what you have is an editing process that doesn't look like other processes, where only the tiniest fraction continues over any length of evolutionary time. And that tiny fraction disproportionately carries the subtle changes that make a difference. And the accumulation of those subtle changes are what distinguishes you from a single-celled organism, right? It's what makes up the stuff of success. The cutting room floor is full of almost everything, and it is only that tiny rarefied subset that gets accumulated and sticks. And so that process just naturally happens to create miracles as a regular matter, right? That's what we don't get. The patterns that evolution, that natural selection produces are tantamount to miracles, and they are the result of an incredibly picky editing process that keeps only the cream of the crop.
The cream of the crop. And so how do you apply that in a way that, or how have you seen people react to your repackaging of various phenomena, let's just say in the cultural space, through this lens, through your toolkit? How does that give people grounding? What have you seen that gives people help or hope or surety in the chaos, all that noise of the cultural domain?
Well, let's try it this way. People, almost all of them, use heuristics to think. And we all do. I'm not arguing that I'm an exception to that. But you have to use heuristics, which means basically cheat codes that allow you not to have to calculate everything longhand. And mostly these cheat codes work. right? If I see a video and it looks like Benjamin Boyce, it's probably Benjamin Boyce. Now, increasingly, that heuristic is going to break down as deepfakes get better and better, and it's going to be harder and harder for me to detect what you may actually have said or what somebody wants me to think you've said. But in general, I can assume if I see you, it's you. That's a good cheat. I don't have to, test your DNA or look at your fingerprints to establish anything. But the problem is, when it comes to difficult frontier evolutionary logic, people want to use their normal heuristics for figuring out what's true. And by and large, if you go to a biologist and you say, tell me the difference between DNA and RNA, and the biologist says, well, let me tell you, and then they give you a list of a couple of differences, right? What are the chances that what they've told you is wrong? Almost zero. So what you've done is you've used a heuristic, which is that socially, these people pretty much know what they're talking about in biology space. And so if I go to them and they tell me something, I don't have to go check it, right? I just accept it. Now what happens if you have a pandemic and you want to know about a virus and where it probably came from and what it's going to do and what you should do to protect yourself? And you think, well, I'll just use the same heuristic. I'll go chat with a biologist. And in fact, I can do better. I can go chat with a virologist. Your heuristic doesn't work. It doesn't work because almost every virologist has a conflict of interest, right? Their field is now a highlighted field. Mm-hmm. So there's some jockeying for position, who are the virologists worth talking to? And then there is concern, in this case, about what role virologists may have played in creating the pandemic. So there's obviously a narrative that is discounted and another narrative that's elevated. And so the heuristic that allowed you to figure out what the difference between DNA and RNA was doesn't allow you to figure out what's going on in a pandemic. And what that means, actually, is that if you have a general toolkit, right, here's how I figure out what's going on, and I don't lean too heavily on social information, right? I check social information and I figure out which biologists I can listen to and which ones are sending up red flags, right? Then I can actually outthink a field. A corrupt field is actually easy to outthink because it's constantly saying wrong things as it's protecting its interests. So in any case, I think part of the relationship with the audience is about them appreciating watching biologists willing to think out loud, to show their work, to explain why they depart from the conventional wisdom. And then I think it's very rewarding in some sense over time to watch a ridiculed perspective go mainstream and you think, oh, geez, I know why they didn't agree with the mainstream perspective, and that allowed me to be, months or a year ahead of the mainstream. That's kind of an exhilarating phenomenon. So I think that's part of why people are paying attention to us, that actually just seeing people share their work, own up to their errors is a healthy and fun thing to do.